making me cry. My mother said, crying into her beer. The beer, the color of a cross in piss. The beer slurring old love into tears. The beer, the color of a stained page. The beer foaming up the glass like a rabid rat. Good writing makes me cry.
My name is Scott Baker. I'm the Artistic Director of Performers Under Stress. I also directed You Need to Read Poetry. So I was lamenting the fact that I used to read and talk about poetry a lot back in college, and even in Chicago a lot, where we're from. And I was lamenting that I don't do that anymore, because every time I try to start a conversation about poetry, people tell me, no, I don't read poetry, I don't know what you're talking about. And that really bothered me, because I really want to talk about it. I read stuff and you like to be able to discuss it. And online is great, but it's really good to have a conversation with somebody. So I figured, what can I do? It's like, well, I have a theater company. I could create a play about poetry. And maybe that would inspire people to have it become more a part of their life, because especially in San Francisco, this is a very literate town. There are poetry readings all the time. There are poetry slams all over the Bay. There's so much poetry in this town, and a lot of people are not exposed to it because it's presented as being hard or difficult, or they went to a bad English class in college and they just don't want anything to do with it, or they had a high school teacher that bored the crap out of them and made it irrelevant. What we want to do is make poetry relevant to people again. That a theater-going community especially, which is like one step away from poetry, because all the early theater is poetry. The Greeks were all poetry. Those were all in verse. Shakespeare, all the way to current time, there's still verse plays, but poetry belongs in the theater. So I thought it was a natural marriage to bring works that don't have a theatrical context and make them have a theatrical context.
I like my body when it is with your body. It is so quite new and thing. Muscles better and nerves more.
I like your body. I like what it does. I like its house. I like to feel the spine of your body and its bones and the firm, trembling smoothness, which I will again and again and again.
Kiss. I like kissing this and that of you. I like slowly stroking the shocking fuzz of your electric fur.
And we're a very physical-based theater company. We like to include a lot of physical elements. So on stage, unfortunately, you see a lot of head acting, where the actors are just acting from up here and maybe the hands if you're lucky. Here we try to incorporate the whole body and get the words through the body and out to the audience.
So quite new.
But we do a long process to get the actors more in touch with their body and to be able to express words through how they move. So I spent a lot of time with them, and this group was particularly physically talented. So a lot of the stuff you see there is stuff that I would start them on the way, and then they would find, oh, I can do this and I can do that. So a lot of it is their own interpretation, and they were given a lot of freedom to find their own interpretations. So Nazelah Jamison, who wonderful actor, is the organizer and conducts the Oakland Poetry Slam. She's also been a National Poetry Slam champion. Valerie Fachman came with me came to San Francisco with me, and she's part of the company. She's also written poetry. Gino Rose is also a published poet. So there's some people that have a poetic background, and then there's about half the cast that has absolutely no connection with poetry until this show, and now they're reading it like crazy.
He hinted at times.
Well, I think something that works in the theatrical execution so Charles Bukowski springs to mind. Now, a lot of people know him as a drunken poet from Barfly, the movie, but really a lot of his early poetry is much more grounded and much more narrative. So poems that work well on stage are things that tell a story. And we had a lot of those tonight. In fact, we had one big section that's all stories. And Bukowski was in there. Tom Gunn, who was a poet both in San Francisco and in Berkeley, no longer with us, unfortunately, writes really formalistic verse. One of the few poets that still writes in rhyming couplets. But his stuff is so vital and so interesting and tells wonderful stories. We started the process by just talking about the words in the poem and what it might mean and some historical background if there was anything that we knew, and then just playing with it before we even got up on stage and started moving around, just talking it and playing with it. I don't write that much poetry anymore for outside consumption. I think at a certain point you realize there are people that do this better than you, and as much as I love poetry and will always keep writing it, I'd prefer to present poems that are already written that I really, really enjoy, and spread my enjoyment so other people can experience it. So the next step, we wanted to get this out there first to see if it would even work, because it's an idea in your head and the workshops are going well and rehearsals are going well, but until you get an audience, you don't really know. So the next step is to try to take this touring to high schools and colleges, and we've had some interest, and also remount the production, so there will be a You Need to Read Poetry 2, or continuing, whatever. But it'll be basically this with some things worked around. We had, for time reasons, we had to cut some things out. There's a whole improvisation, which we called the explication game, where we take a poem, read it, and then we have two actors improvise a meaning around it, which is fun, but we ran out of time. And there's also an exquisite corpse that some nights we do with the audience. We have slips of paper where they write a sentence or a word, and then I come and put them together to have a found poem that I read to the audience. So the audience, in fact, creates a poem. So that's stuff we want to incorporate into the next incarnation.